One of the greatest challenges when making a movie from a video game is that a lot of older video games, and many modern ones too, lack a truly complex and in-depth storyline, certainly one with characters that are fully fleshed out. However, there are plenty of video games where this certainly isn't a problem. The Assassin's Creed series, for example, not only has one truly great story with a few fleshed out characters, but it has an entire history of them, going all the way back to prehistory, so how can it fail? Hello there, welcome to saberduelgaming, where we always take the high ground, and welcome to my review of Assassin's Creed the movie. Whilst my personal preference for an Assassin's Creed movie would have followed that of the video games, starting back with Odyssey or Origins, probably the two I enjoyed most, it isn't too much of a surprise that this one is instead set during the Spanish Inquisition. This is the time period and theme of the second game, with Ezio potentially one of the franchise's most popular characters. However, despite being set during this time period, this is actually a completely original story, and our main character isn't actually Ezio or any other character we've seen in the video games. But let's be honest, sometimes taking a bit of liberty and creating a new story isn't always the worst way to go, as long as the story you create is pretty good. So let's take a look at what this movie does well. First of all, there is the cast. Michael Fassbender and Jeremy Irons as two of the lead names in this are a fantastic start. Both amazing actors, really likeable, relatable, and quite fitting for the characters they're playing, so no problems there. The rest of the supporting cast are perfectly fine too. There's no one in there that you actually think, what the hell are they doing there? So that's all good. The design of the Artemis, which allows our character to travel back into their ancestors' history, or at least the memories of them, and perform all kinds of athletic stunts there, is good too. It is different to the video game where they normally just sit in a chair or lay in some sort of padded bed. Instead, this time we get some massive contraption that attaches them to it and allows them to leap around, climb, and in fairness, I think it's pretty good. It makes sense because, visually speaking, we don't want to just keep coming back to flashbacks of our character lying down or sitting there. Having the real person jumping around and leaping in the same way as they are inside the Artemis is a really good choice in my opinion. Whilst the story is an original story, it does very much fit the theme of the earlier Assassin's Creed games. Doesn't exactly contradict anything dramatically, it just comes at it from a original way. Often at video game movies, the fact that they don't follow the story makes the story substantially lesser. However, this managed to capture the essence of the original games, even if it didn't choose to follow one of the stories that the fans of the games would be familiar with. This is a really common theme with video game adaptations into movies. The writers, directors want to create an original story while still capitalizing on the existing theme, the existing franchise, and its fan base. The slight criticism of this is they don't do this with books. Usually a book adaptation is relatively faithful, at least on most occasions. Whilst there may be big chunks of it missing, the general story is the same. Why with video games are they so adamant to always create their own new story? Well, I can't really answer that one. It's kind of a mystery to me, especially when video games like this have such an in-depth and complex story, certainly as complex and in-depth as a book that they could build on. But that's by the by. The question was, would this film be a hit with its core fanbase and with audiences in general? How was it received when it was released? Assassin's Creed was released in December 2016, pushed back multiple times from its initial release date of May 2015. Whilst this is often because they want to make finishing touches to a film and final tweaks that may make it even better, usually it's not a good sign. The film grossed worldwide around $241 million, against a budget of $125 million. Sounds good initially. However, when factoring in all additional promotional costs, the studio actually lost $75 to $100 million on this film. That alone was certainly enough to make sure that some of the planned sequels, which had been in the works already, were cancelled instantly. But that doesn't mean the film wasn't actually good, or that it wasn't received well by fans and critics. On first glance, however, the reviews all look super negative, but there is a bit of a silver lining along with that. On Metacritic, the film got a 36%, whilst on CinemaScore, audiences gave it a B+. These kind of contradict each other. On Rotten Tomatoes, it got a 19%, but it was one quote on there that perhaps summarises it best. Assassin's Creed is arguably better made and certainly better cast than most video game adaptations. Unfortunately, the CGI-fueled end result is still a joylessly overplotted slog. This was actually kind of the theme. People seemed to almost compliment and insult the film at the same time. David Ehrlich of IndieWire gave this film a score of B-, which, I'm sorry, sounds like a pretty damn good score still. However, his quote was much more telling, in which he basically stated that describing this as the best video game adaptation of all time is a backhanded compliment. Again, that was the theme this film seemed to get. Praise that somehow still felt like an insult, and massively contradicting scores, potentially the better scores coming from the audience rather than the critics, which is kinda to be expected with video game adaptations. But what about me? What did I think of this film? Well, when I first went to see it, I only had a very basic understanding of the Assassin's Creed games. It was about a year or two later, I would become massively into the franchise, so I didn't have any particular association to it. I had a rough understanding of the story, but that was about it. From my perspective of just watching a film with a rough understanding of what the game should look like, I actually thought it was represented very well. I was also a big fan of both the lead actors I mentioned earlier, so seeing those two in it really helped too. I have a term I tend to use for a lot of movies, and that term is dumb fun. I use it to describe lots of films that often get really crap reviews from critics, but that in truth, when watching, I know it's brainless entertainment, but I enjoy it. Films like Van Helsing, the Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, or Hansel and Gretel, they're all dumb fun. They ain't gonna win any Oscars, but they're still entertaining to watch, and this film kinda fit that vibe for me. I suppose one of the most telling signs, however, is that since I got more into the Assassin's Creed games, I kinda got less into this movie. Now, has that made the movie less entertaining? Probably not, but I suppose what I've come to love about the games is maybe not as well represented in this. On the surface it is. Hell, as I'm watching the footage now, I'm looking and thinking, this does look like Assassin's Creed. All those signature moves and leaps and parkour and assassinations are in there. However, that is kind of part of the problem. There's this misunderstanding by producers, writers and directors that if a film has key elements and looks a bit like the game, that they've hit the mark. What they often forget is that what makes modern video games so entertaining is usually the story, the narrative and the characters that are in there, the interactions between those characters. When they try and tell their own story, their own characters, they lose it. In doing this review, I went back to watch this film again because I hadn't seen it in a really long time. And again, as I described before, I consider it to be dumb fun. But good dumb fun. It was enjoyable, it was entertaining. The only downside is now as a bigger Assassin's Creed fan, I didn't enjoy it any more than I did the first time around. But I didn't enjoy it any less either. I think giving this a rating of 7 out of 10 is perfectly fine, especially given I'm only expecting it to be a bit of action and entertainment. If I was expecting more of it, it certainly wouldn't get a 7 out of 10, but from what I expected back then and even now, I think that's good enough. If you thought this was a better or worse film than I've said, please comment below and let me know. And always, consider subscribing, it helps a lot and I really appreciate it. And if you happen to be a big fan of the Assassin's Creed games and want to see reviews or playthroughs of Assassin's Creed Origins, you can find them on my channel and I might put the links down below. Until next time, thanks for watching and of course, take the high ground.